a fire talk, and I had it like lined up just in case someone needed like a quick presentation. And then I threw it out in the workplace, and I was like, yo, who wants to hear about this? And I got a lot of good feedback. So I was like, I'm just going to give a talk. So it's kind of rough on the edges. It's less of like an informative talk and more of like a concept that I'm trying to get across. But it was kind of started out as a fire talk, and I'm just going to go through. So I'm going to talk about getting started on projects, like kind of what you don't learn in school, and how to supplement your education, and how to grow. So who am I? Fourth year, president, I do Linux stuff. I start a lot of projects, and I finish less projects than I start by a large margin. So personal projects, like why you should do them, what they are, what makes a good project. I'm going to give some examples of projects from some of the upperclassmen, and then give some alternatives in other areas that you can learn. What is a project? So a project is something you do outside of class to help you learn. So the whole point of the project is to learn. It doesn't really have to be like the best project. You don't have to write like the most secure app in the world. You don't have to go be able to sell this for thousands of dollars. It's just a way to learn, really. And it's something you do, but really outside of class is the biggest thing. Like, these are things you're like, oh, I know I'm not good in this area and I want to be. Then you do the project. It's not just like, oh yeah, I took CDT and I wrote this blue team script that changed all my passwords. That's less of a project in my opinion. So, reasons not to do a project. And I hear a lot of these when I talk to students. They're like, I don't know what to do. Well, that's why I'm giving this talk. And also, ask the upperclassmen, because I know a lot of me and a lot of the guys I work with, we have tons of projects, and we just have no time to do them. So like, if you want cool project ideas, talk to us. We have loads of projects. Newman, how many projects you got stacked up? 5? Yeah?
Not a lot.
That's a good amount. That's manageable. All right. The other one here is, all I know is like CS. All I know is sysadmin. All I know is CSEC 101. Like freshmen, you come in, you only take those classes, right? You start off in CSEC 101 and CS1, and then you move on to sysadmin or netcert or routing and switching. And then, so like for the first 2 years, you're really taking a lot of networking classes and a lot of CS classes. But that's a good thing because like, and you're like, that's all I know, but that's okay because the reason we learn those is because they're a foundation for everything that we do in the future. Like all of the projects you're going to be doing in the future have some sort of programming involved. All the projects you're going to be doing, well not all, a lot of the projects you're going to be doing have some sort of like sysadmin or networking skills involved, or just like all these fundamental skills you're doing. That's why you're learning those freshman year. So like that's not a good excuse to say this is all I know. I can't do a project in this. Just find a project that uses programming. I promise you it's not very hard because again, these are fundamental aspects. And then I hear like, that sounds like a lot of time. It is. And like that's just kind of the thing. It's like going to the cyber gym is what I put. You got to go, like if you're not going to invest the time, you're not going to get the benefits of it. And that like you're not going to improve. So you got to improve yourself, and like this is how you do it. It is a time commitment. You do have to spend some time in the labs. You do have to learn, but you're not going to learn unless you invest time. So that's just kind of something you got to get over. No. Talk to Josh Stutz. All right. So why would you want to do a project, right? Like you have some reasons that invalidated your reasons not to do a project. So why would you want to do it? The first thing is employers love them. So I am dressed up all fancy, not for you guys, sorry. I was at the Industrial Advisory Board, and I was like literally an hour ago having this conversation with someone, and he's like, yeah, he's like, whenever I look for people's resumes, he's like, we usually get a good stack at the career fair. He says, I flip through them, and if you do not have personal projects, I literally throw them away. He said, and then I start recruiting. Like, quote. So like, this is what people look for. Every interview I've ever had, they've asked me about what my projects are. If you guys came to the resume prep or the career fair prep, put your projects on there. Then like I told everyone I talked to, put your projects on there. Like show your skills, show your different areas. Employers love this. It shows that you're willing to put in the time, to put in the effort. It shows that you care about what you're doing, that you're interested in it. Because employers want to know that you like what you're doing. If you're just like, yeah, I'm going to show up to work, I'm putting my 40 hours, and that's the end of it, they're not going to want to hear that because they want someone that like cares about what they do. They want someone that loves what they do and has a lot of fun at work and that's like willing to try out these new things. So like getting jobs is like projects are critical for that. Employers will always look for that. I've done some screening for some of my previous employers and they've told me they're like if they don't have projects, like just don't even accept them. Like just let it go. So it's a great way. It also gives you something to talk about. Like so if you're like, I don't know what to do when I walk up to this employer and I don't know what to talk about myself. Talk about your projects. It's cool. People like to hear it. Next up is to grow. Do it for you. Like you want to be able to grow and you want to be able to learn new things. You want to be able to try out some new skills, test some areas that you've never tested out before. That's why you do these projects. You can put them on your GitHub, put them on your resume, and you get to interact with like upperclassmen. You get to present them here. And that brings me to the last thing. You do it to give research talks. So the fundamental goal of research is to learn and to share. So like, I remember when I was a little freshman Micah, I would come to Sparsa and I'd hear all these talks on ridiculous things that I had no idea and I didn't understand them at all. But now that I go back, like that knowledge has kind of been shared and passed down. So that's why we do this. We're trying to like share with you what we've learned, and then when you go out and spend all this time researching it, share it with us, because I probably haven't researched the same thing that you just researched. So share it with me. Actually, you'll get to that in a minute. I talked to several upperclassmen, so maybe about 15 minutes on Workplace. Yeah, so like if you find this stuff interesting, someone else is probably going to find this interesting as well. All right, what makes a good project? Growth. You want to have something that you want to learn from it. So like I said, like these are all reasons to do it, but like this is like the core aspect of what makes a good project. So find something that like in area. So like be like, oh, I want to learn more about programming. I want to learn more about defense, pen testing, yada yada. Find something that looks cool. It could be random, it could be new. Like I said, these projects don't have to work. And we're going to see some of the examples where people are like, yeah, my project just failed, right? Like that's it. That's okay, you still learned. So set some goals, be like, oh, I want to learn X. How could I build this thing? How does this thing work? And then start from there. Goals, you've all heard of like SMART goals. This is like a soft skills sort of thing, but I've found it kind of useful. Find goals that are like specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So you want like, you don't want to be like, I set out to program, right? That's not a good goal because like you don't have any way to measure that. You don't have any way of doing it. So be like, okay, I want to implement this thing in this amount of time, and I want to have it ready for ISTS or something like that. So like, and then know what, like, and part of that is like getting achievable, knowing what you want out of it, right? So like, know what you want to, do I want a certification? Do I want to study for OSCP to get the OSCP cert? Do I want to create this new piece of malware? And then that's very measurable, and you can achieve that goal, and then you feel better as you achieve that goal. And then set a path to achieve that, kind of just plan it out. That kind of goes into just, this is just good goal setting independent of just projects. Pick something that's difficult. Oftentimes, people are like, oh yeah, I want to do this project. And then they just pick something they already know. But then what's the point of doing it if you already know it, right? Like, pick something new. The whole point of these are to learn. And the whole point of these are to like step out in new areas and make yourself better for employers and better for yourself as you address new problems. So just pick something that you know is going to be difficult, that you know don't already. And if you fail, so what? You don't even have to talk about it. You could pretend you never did that project and you still probably learned something. And if it's more difficult, people want to talk about it. Like the coolest presentations I've seen here are projects that are like super unique that no one else has ever done before. And like they weren't easy problems. People just thought about it and then like, I'm going to go out and solve that. So don't pick something that's just like, oh yeah, you know, I wrote a bash script to like automate setting up SSH, right? Like that's kind of, that's different than just being like, oh yeah, I reverse engineered an Xbox and got root or something like that. So find difficult things. All right, so solid starting projects. So I asked a bunch of people, I was like, what was your first personal project at RIT and security? And here's some of the answers that I got, and just kind of cool projects that I thought some people had done. So Brandon Adler, he said he rewrote old ISTS scripts. Why is that a good project? So this is a good project because, one, it's useful. It helps ISTS. Like these scripts were used in setting up ISTS for the next 3 years. So it had a very good deliverable. It helped Brandon. He got to learn some PowerShell, got to learn a little bit more about like the Windows stuff. And then it was achievable. It was not impossible, but it was easy to measure. He was able to say, does my script work? Can I use it at ISTS? Yes, boom. And then growth areas, got to work with other people's code. That's always a good challenge, and got to learn a new language. So maybe something along that line, like find a cool tool and revamp it. That's a great project if you're willing to put in the time and make it new and creative in some way. Also, he did a war driving project. So he's like, yeah, this is a great thing. So he said, it's a great project because after a few hours, you already feel like, oh, I did something super cool. Like, and you just saw this fox hunting presentation. Like, after a little bit of work and you're going out there, you learn a bit, and then you're like, wow, I already have like all these results coming in. This one's a little easier and less difficult. So if you feel like you already know the scripts, set it up. Maybe pick into something a little difficult, but you learn how to script. You learn Linux a little bit, you learn a little bit about wireless and hardware. So if you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing, that's a great project to start with. Ben Bornholm, I don't think he's here. He wrote a web, what? He's sleeping. Okay, he wrote a web GUI for Nmap so he could like go to a website and then control Nmap. Solid deliverables. He had something to show for it. He learned Flask and Python. He had nothing. He knew nothing about Nmap. He said he was a freshman, so he just like knew nothing about this. So he got to learn in those areas. And then he said he found out later that it just was RCE on the system, and he could just control the box from the web GUI. So he's like, yeah, I destroyed it. But that's okay, because he still learned from it, and that's the most important part. And he can still go to employers, and he can still talk about it. Nick O'Brien was trying to use machine learning to analyze crypto. So like that's a buzzword and a half in a sentence. Didn't work. So exactly, and Nick is like, oh, you don't want to talk about that project. It was a massive failure. But that's okay, because that's how you learn best. And you learn about why it didn't work. You learn about other areas to follow in. He learned more about neural nets and modes of operation for crypto because of it. But I don't know. I wouldn't have started with that project, to be honest. But this is project for everyone, I guess. All right, Scott Court. He's like, yeah, I just made my own Linux distribution. So he wanted to learn about the inner workings of Linux, and that kind of just took him down the rabbit hole. And then now he rags on systemd. But you know, that's where it takes you. But that's also really cool. This is a really cool factor, because like not many people maintain their own Linux distribution and repositories and everything. So like he can go talk to employers, and like I guarantee you most of them have never heard someone be like, yes, I run my own Linux distribution. So that's like, it's kind of a good cool factor. It's a good project, and it's never ending. So he can just keep learning about new areas. He got to learn about like secure programming, how to make patches on software, all kinds of really interesting stuff. So like that's a really solid project. I would say, yeah, and he does like a little class thing on Sundays if you kind of want to get into that yourself. But really good project, really good uniqueness, has a good cool factor. Rain Cavero, he did an Arch installation. So he's like, yeah, this is a great project for beginners. It's got a lot of solid resources. It's well documented. It's like you can go online. A lot of your problems are, you can search them up. You can find answers to them. And there's a lot to learn about. You get to learn Linux basics. And then he's like, once you get it installed, then you start the next project of like customizing your Arch installation. And then you can go to Reddit and post all your pictures of your Arch things with your transparent backgrounds and do that. But that's another project. It's just a good, solid beginner project. If you're like, I have no idea what to do. Again, a lot of documentation. So like, try and find things that are difficult. This one's maybe more for beginners. So if you're like not quite so skilled, but yeah. Nathaniel Beckstead, he mapped SSH logins. So what he did, this is actually pretty cool. He was looking at all his SSH logs. Who here has put up an SSH server on the internet overnight? And then you look at the logs and you see you have like 1 million login attempts from China, or like Singapore, or even the US, like all over. So he was like, hey, why don't I map these out on a little map, and then like so I can move around and see how many login attempts were coming from each place. So I did that. And I was like, what did you learn from it? He's like, I learned everything. He's like, as I kept going, I just kept finding new problems that I had to solve in order to better implement my thing. So he's like, so once I got the map working, he's like, I had to somehow get it in web. So then he learned how to do it through web. And he's like, well, once I did that, he's like, then I realized I had to load balance it. So then he load balanced it. And like, it just kind of kept trailing into more areas that he could learn from. So he's like, this was a great project. He's like, it was a solid start thing. You can look at it here if you go to rootonyour.webcam, and you can see like his little SSH map. It's kind of cool. So it's a simple idea to start with. It's not that complicated to start, but then you keep learning, and there's always more to improve. So his biggest piece of advice was like, even the smallest projects can teach you a lot. So just like take these simple concepts and just run with them. Yeah.
Yesterday I had an interview, and a solid 2/3 of it was based around that project.
Oh, really? Yeah. So yeah, like these projects come up in interviews. That's why we're telling you. You hear about us talking about projects all the time. Just do them. Like this is like the critical aspect of getting hired. There's an invisible bullet point, but that's okay. So my first one, I made send a text or an email whenever you log in SSH. I learned Bash, email, and Linux, and then that was freshman year, and I've kind of never done anything outside of this scope since. So that kind of really set the foundations of my learning curve. No, I'm just kidding. But it was kind of cool. I didn't finish my bullet points on this. Sorry about that. But yeah, it's just send a little SSH thing, and I'd go to log in and send me a text message. But like that was a good learning project. I got a cool deliverable. It's up on my GitHub. I've had employers ask me about that. I think most times I've been interviewed, probably like majority of interviews. Like, hey, tell me about this. Like, why is two-factor important? And they kind of opens up a dialogue that will show them your skill level from there. So that was kind of a cool project. Some other notable projects people were telling me about, like, hey, this is also a really good starting project. Red team, basic callbacks with Flask. Make a botnet. That's pretty cool. You learn a lot. You learn how like networking works. You learn like how basic malware works. You can start using it if you get like you can start red teaming people. Giant misconfiguration scripts. I love doing that. I have like massive 1,000-line misconfiguration scripts that just go through and just wreck your system. So that's kind of what I like to do. PowerShell callbacks if you want to get in some Windows. Automating Ansible deployment of infrastructure. This is a big thing even in the real world. A lot of pen test teams are putting out these tools to help automatically set up their infrastructure, to help get their workflow going for the entire red teams. Like, that's something really cool if you're trying to get into like a gig where you're doing this kind of work. That's a real world thing. Backdoor. What? What about GScript? That's like ish one. But GScript is deployment of malware, so you need malware to deploy before you can use GScript. So it's like, have the malware first. It could be a project. If you have cool malware, it's already a good project. Backdoor some service modules. So some of the people here, like Chris, he backdoored an Apache module, yeah, and like got it going in so he could like go and just execute commands through your web box. That's pretty cool. We have one for a lot of other different services. I like to backdoor mail so I can hack your mailboxes. A lot of really cool service things you can backdoor, so that's a good thing to look into. Competitions. Personally, I think I've learned the most from red versus blue competitions. Not only blue teaming them, but white teaming and red teaming them as well. You learn how to set up infrastructure. So you're like, hey, I'm preparing for UB lockdown in a couple weeks. What do? Set up some infrastructure. That's where you start. Once you get your infrastructure set up, you're like, oh, hey, now like how do I defend this? How do I get firewalls going on it? How do I get routers, process monitoring, kind of start looking for things going on? Then you get into sysadmin stuff where like things go wrong. That's the whole point of the red team. We make your things go wrong. How do I fix them? And that's where you're going to learn. You're going to learn how to check the logs and all that stuff. So like, there's a lot of really good talks. Chris just gave one right before this on how to blue team. Like that's a whole area in itself. So like that's a great way to learn as well. Basic websites, learn Flask, Node.js, whatever you want to do your blog in. A lot of people say make a blog. Like you not only get to have a blog, you have a great deliverable. You write up on some of the other stuff that you do. You can show employers, like, hey, you want to know what I've done? Go to my blog. Like it has outlines of everything that I've learned, everything that I've done from there. Make simple web apps for tools. So like Ben did Nmap. You can kind of go from there. And then if you want like web pen testing, there's like DVWA, like hacking into websites, common web vulnerabilities, and things such as that. And then there's some other areas. So these are like less traditional projects and more just like things you can do to learn. So like learning pen testing. There's like a million resources in competition. CPTC, Hack the Box, VulnHub, Over the Wire. Like do this. Go to the interest group. There's a lot of different ways to learn this stuff. You just got to go out there and find it and then find a way to talk about it. Find a way to make it interesting to the employers. Capture the flag. There's so many capture the flags. There's capture the flags every weekend, multiple. They give a really solid foundation on a lot of other skills. They kind of give you really good problem solving skills. You get to learn different areas. Go to the Team Contagion interest group. There's a Parsons CTF we just announced in 2 weeks. Our RITSEC CTF is coming up in a couple weeks. Over the Wire. There's a lot of like really good resources on this. You just gotta like step out there and do it. And then again, find ways to talk about this to employers. Find ways to put this on your resume. This is the stuff that they care about. Reverse engineering, micro corruption. Brad, he mentioned that. He says the best thing. It's actually really kind of cool. Like they have like debuggers. It's all in your web. You don't need to install anything. You can look at like memory dumps. And you can learn all this kind of stuff and solve these challenges. And then yeah, there's the reversing interest group with Brad. Check that out if you want to get into this. And then like again, start doing projects then based on this stuff. All right, so I don't have a question slide, but this is the end of my presentation. Any questions? Any cool projects that you've ever done that you want to share with everyone you think they might learn? Chaim, what was your first project in security?
Python wasn't really a thing. I was like a really big fan of Python. Everyone told me I was stupid. I'm older. And when I came in, I was like, Python's fucking it. Like, it's good and it's fun. And I think I probably did like Stampy project first. That was when there was no C6. It was all networking.
Oh.
So like everybody else like
What's the coolest project you've ever done?
I won't say the coolest one. Probably like a data but it like popped around all of our ATs and got caught right at the loop. It didn't like go out in the tunnel. So we tried to the coolest surveillance at that time. This is before Snowden too, and it's pretty interesting because, well, first I'm talking about like releasing the previous Iranian broad states in now entire cities, and then I'm talking about like surveillance against people and how everybody knows it's happening, and then like a year or two later, they were like, oh shit, like surveillance, and so that's the one that people tend to remember most. That was like part of that RITSEC.
Yeah. So, what year did you graduate? How much older are you than all of us?
I started in 06.
Okay. So that's Heim. If you haven't met Professor Heim, you take the web class with him. Yeah, so like there's a lot of really cool projects. I remember listening to Heim give talks on his projects. Anyone else have like really cool project ideas that they're like, this was like the coolest thing I've ever done. This is awesome. No? Anything you've been asked about by employers about projects? Yeah? Who here's been interviewed with employers? Who here in those interviews was asked about projects? Okay, so like every single person, they ask in every single interview. So like do your projects, people. It's like homework, but fun.
I've gotten first or second round interviews just talking about my project.
Yeah,
That was
same.
it.
Yeah. Projects are super cool. So find ways to get involved. If you don't have projects, talk to us, ask around, look at the slides, just some cool ones, try and find ideas based on that. But there's a lot of people with a lot of really cool projects, and then you can give cool research talks on them. So, all right, guys, that's why you should do some projects. I hope to see some more projects from you all.